Yeah, test of a prophet.
Test of a prophet.
I can lead us off on that. I've got a couple things I can say about it.
Yeah.
So this is Deuteronomy 18 is kind of the big one, right? It's verse 22. I'll read it here real quick. When a prophet speaks in the name of the Lord, if the thing does not come to pass or come true, that is the word of the Lord. That is a word that the Lord has not spoken. The prophet has spoken presumptuously. You need not be afraid of him. Okay. Seems simple enough, right? Hey, a guy comes and says that he's a prophet and he prophesies in the name of the Lord that something's going to happen. And if it doesn't happen, you know he's a false prophet. Seems pretty simple, right? The other injunction in Deuteronomy 18 is to say, and if this prophet leads you up to worship a different God, you also know he's not a true prophet, right? So those are
you're supposed to
kill them.
Kill them.
Yeah,
yes.
And the people that follow him.
That's how you know,
by the way.
Which is
You're
what
supposed
Elijah
to kill
did.
them.
That's why Elijah's killing the priest of Baal.
So so it's really hardcore, Deuteronomy 18. Okay, at first glance, it seems pretty straightforward, right? Problem. Okay, I'm a prophet, and I prophesy in the name of the Lord that in 500 years, this thing is going to happen.
All right.
You're all going to be here in 500 years, right? To see if it comes, if it checks. You see the problem here, like this.
Yep.
The application of this chapter, just broadly speaking, it's very limited if you're going to get into this world of predictive prophecy supposed to come in centuries or even decades, right? Because in some cases, guys are going to make predictions and no one's around to test if it actually comes true or not. Yeah. So I think the more immediate application of Deuteronomy 18 is within the Israelite community as Moses is centralizing his authority as the prophetic figure for the Israelites coming into the promised land. You have prophetic rivals and other claimants who are trying to dissuade the children of Israel to, take other paths or believe other things. This is essentially trying to centralize it back into Moses and exclude other prophetic claimants for their immediate time and circumstance, right? Again, broadly speaking, we can apply this to prophets if we want, okay, but there's limits to this, right? Just on the level of the text itself. The test it sets up, like the Berean test, you will run into problems with using this test as a foolproof test in all cases. There's another biblical problem that comes with using this as a test for prophetic legitimacy. What happens when God tells a prophet to say something and then God changes his mind afterwards?
He never does.
Which happens.
He never does.
No, he never does that.
He never does that.
That is literally the whole book of Jonah.
Yeah.
And that's the point of the book of Jonah, is that God told Jonah to go do a thing. Jonah did the thing. The people repented. And God said, JK, I'm not going to destroy them because they repented. And Jonah gets mad about it.
Yeah.
Well, and as Moses was sitting there authoring Genesis and Exodus, of course, in Exodus, he records an account of God specifically changing his mind about killing the Israelites.
About killing the Israelites, exactly.
Talks him out of it, in fact.
Yeah. So that's the whole point. There's another final problem here. And the issue of Jonah and these other things, issues of divine contingency, divine foreknowledge, are predictive prophecies set in stone, or can they be altered or changed or whatever, right? These are deep theological issues that you can't just resolve by throwing Deuteronomy 18 at it. It gets even more complicated with texts like Jeremiah 17, where it explicitly says God withholds his blessings or destructions from people depending on how they act in response to it. And this in the context of the Babylonian exile, right? The Babylonian destruction of Judah, okay? It's verses 7 through 10. He explicitly says, I will dole out destruction or blessings depending on how people accept or reject me. So if you're a prophet saying, I prophesy God is going to bring destruction, and then the people repent and they don't, does that make you a false prophet? Right. But what if God had told you as a prophet, go tell the people they will be destroyed? But then the outcome is different. You see what I'm getting at here? Yep. So for all these reasons and more, this test of a prophet doesn't really work.
And from that, it becomes a problem of God sending prophets to tell people to repent. The people kill the prophets. Oh, well, that was the intended result. God knew that would happen. So again, what was the function of the prophet in the first place? Was God just trying to get people killed? It really does become this whole theological apologetic, trying to figure out how do I reconcile that with my idea that God never changes his mind, he never varies. They use passages like that, and it becomes incredibly complicated. And I think that a lot of people just, again, with proof texting, that's a problem, is that they'll go to a passage, they'll say, I'm going to apply this text to the whole Bible, and I don't know it well enough to realize that can't be applicable.
It also runs into a problem when you have a prophet, let's say Joseph Smith's case, right, who gives predictive prophecies, sometimes in the name of the Lord. Some of them seem to not be fulfilled, which is what our evangelical critics like to point out. But what about the ones that were fulfilled? So contrast with me D&C 84 with D&C 87. That's D&C 84 is the build this temple in this generation in Missouri. First of all, it says there shall a temple be built or whatever. Is that a command or whatever? But the punchline is, okay, this is when people focus on. Joseph Smith said the temple in Missouri would be built, and it wasn't. False prophet. He fails the test. But what about the Civil War prophecy? Which really crazily, strikingly seems to get fulfilled, down to the fact that it'll start in South Carolina. It'll be a slave thing. They'll call in other nations. It'll be this horrible thing. If you listen to Garrett Dirkmott's wonderful podcast, he talks about the Civil War prophecy. Nobody was expecting the Civil War to blow up the way it did. They were expecting it to be a short skirmish. No one thought it would balloon into a 4-year long with 600,000 people dead and absolute wanton destruction, right? So it's a double-edged sword. What do you do with prophecies seem to come true? See what I'm saying here? So you have to keep that balance with these different kinds of factors.
That is actually something the Bible brings up. You go to Deuteronomy 13 instead of 18. That actually says that if a prophet prophesies something and it happens, if he's telling you to go after other gods, he's still a false prophet.
Yeah.
So whether something is fulfilled or not isn't necessarily the only determination.
Which again brings in the complexity. It brings in the complexity of other nations also have deities who could be fulfilling the prophecy.
Balaam. That's the whole point of Balaam in Numbers.
The prophecies of their people and their prophets, and that's a whole nother issue.
The final thing I'll just say real quick, and then I'll let you go, Sarah. Be very careful with how you want to apply this test, because guess who arguably fails the Deuteronomy 18 test in the New Testament? A guy named Jesus.
Matthew 24.
Who seemingly, according to Matthew 24, seemed to predict that all these things would happen in this generation, the signs of the Son of Man coming and so forth.
Lots of apologetics written on that, trying to forgive that. Yeah.
And I understand,
or reinterpret it that way.
But the problem, again, you run into this problem, right?
Paul has the same idea.
Paul is expecting the second will happen. As a matter of fact, I think it's, help me out, Ben, but isn't it 2 Peter is written, we think, in response to stuff in 1 Peter for not coming, the second coming?
No, it's 1st and 2nd Thessalonians.
Thessalonians, that's right.
Thessalonians. He basically says, he's coming and you should be prepared.
Get ready.
Apparently between 1st and 2nd Thessalonians, some people had quit working. And they were like, okay, God, I'm ready. He's like, no. I mean, it's soon, but you can't.
Keep your job.
Right. Yeah. On the own terms of how this test is supposed to work, Jesus runs into a problem, Paul runs into a problem, and you can play this game with these guys.
Well, and again, remember, it's Matthew recording that Jesus said this thing. Sure. And again, I think that is something that, with regards to some of the two topics we've discussed so far, is people are sometimes divorced from that idea, and Latter-day Saints are much more comfortable with the idea of Matthew wrote these words down. John wrote these words. Yes, we should.
So many Latter-day Saints have unwittingly borrowed Protestant inerrantism.
Jesus is not being followed around by a stenographer. That's not what's happening.
Right.
Yeah.
But that's what The Chosen depicts it as. Matthew has a little writing board.
I've never seen The Chosen. Is that what's going on?
That's literally.
I mean, it's fun, and it's kind of fun to think about. But
and John's following him in and out of his.
He literally has that in The Chosen,
going in and out. Really?
Yeah.
Yes.
Wow. The prophet issue for evangelicals, I think, is much more of a cultural clash than a scriptural clash. For them, they are the prophet. Or perhaps their local pastor that they see on Sunday is treated as the prophet. If somebody else has authority over them in any way that isn't their own interpretation of the Bible, that's wrong and bad and super dangerous for them. So the idea that a prophet could even exist in these days, culturally, they don't even know how to go there.
And occasionally you get exceptions that prove the rule. I mean, you have the Seventh-day Adventists, where they have Ellen White, whom they explicitly call a prophet and inspired, but her prophethood only extended to interpreting the Bible correctly.
Yeah, right.
Not bringing forth new things, not restoring the idea of prophets. It was a one-time prophet to make sure we had the right interpretation of the Bible, and we stick to that.
It's very Western individual stuff, right? Yeah. Like, I have to make sure I have the right interpretation for me, and don't you dare try to tell me what you think is true. They bring that to Scripture.
Trusting a leader over the group is...